All right. Well, today's episode of Days on the Land, the podcast series, is coming to you on the road, so to speak. I am winter camping, my first time hot tenting. Um, and I'm going to read some stuff that I've gathered. And if you want to see this adventure, then of course it's on my YouTube channel as some sort of outdoor dipshittery. But I don't have any guests today, so I'm flying solo here, and I'm going to read you guys this Conservation in the West, the 2026 Survey of Attitudes of Voters in 8 Western States. So without further ado, I got it on my iPad here. I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights. So this study is done by by Colorado College, and they have done this for years. And it's basically, like it says in the title, it's a survey of attitudes of Western voters in the 8 Intermountain Rockies states. So from Montana on down to New Mexico on either side of that sort of line. And so it's a telephone, online interview with registered voters in 8 states: Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. I will link to this, so if you want to see any of the actual get into it a little bit more, then you can do that. But this is pretty interesting, and the results, in my opinion, are I guess they're not all that surprising, but they show us that we have a whole lot more in common than we think we do. Gotta finish my afternoon coffee. Oh, that's good. The demographics, about 50-50 male to female. The age range from 18 to 65 plus. So who knows? Big wide range. The majority of those surveyed being in the 45, between 45 and over 65. Geography, about 25% in big city. And then, 40% in the suburbs, and then 17 rural and small town. Ethnicity, 72% white, 28% voters of color, which kind of, they're in the western states, which are predominantly white. So there's not much you can do about that skew there, but 28% of voters of color seems fairly good number to me, though it's not even. As far as the party affiliation goes, this is a little interesting. They definitely got it a little bit more even there. But they broke out another category. So there's 4 categories. There's Republican, 36% were surveyed. Independent, another 36. Democrats, they got 28% of those. And then they broke out another category of people who identified themselves as MAGA supporters, 35%. All right, conservation in 2026. More than 4 in 5 voters across 8 states say that conservation issues are important in deciding whether to support an elected official. Yeah, so the vast majority, like 90% in Colorado, 87% in Wyoming, and with 40% of those saying that it's very important, a candidate's stance on public land issues. Yeah, and it's across the board. It's right in there, right around 80 to 90% total. The importance of issues involving public lands, waters, and wildlife is considerably higher than a decade ago. Solid majority of voters across party lines say the issues are important in deciding whether to support an elected official. 78% Republicans, 86% of independents, and 93% of Democrats. Demographically, women, 88%, Gen Z, 89%, Latinos, 89%, rural voters, 88%, sportsmen, 86%, independents, 86%. And the total the people who would go even further and say that it's very important is right around half of that. So, yeah, I mean, these are huge issues to us. And it makes sense in the West. I mean, if you've grown up here like me, then you really identify with the, how should I say this? If you've grown up here like I have, then you identify yourself with what could be considered the American outback, with the exception of Alaska, of course. But we have some of these just vast tracts of public land that is undeveloped, and it honestly, like it, that is part of me. Like that is where I feel at home. And to know that it's there and protected and accessible is vastly important. Vastly. I mean, I can't say it enough. It's like a psychological thing, just knowing that it's there. The fact that conservation is viewed as important compared to other issues is even more significant given that affordability continues to be a major concern. Yeah, I mean, like, so what people categorize as very important, when they ask people if the cost of living was important to them, I mean, those percentages are in the 90s with, 70 and 80% in the very important class. So for public lands to rank in the 80th percentile as well is pretty telling about how important our public lands are to us. I don't think there's anybody that I know of that is truly that thinks things are going in a good direction, especially over the last year. It's been a mind-numbing onslaught of erosion of the public input, the hastening of permitting, the cutting of funding, removing of information, removing of access, and closing the public out of the decision making process. And then the whole sale in some cases, and it's just, from the border wall. I don't want to digress too much, but let's keep going. Nearly 3 out of 5 voters say that rollbacks of laws that protect our land, water, wildlife are an extremely or very serious problem, which is a significant increase from 2019. Yeah, it's up 10%. Again, 84% of people in the West say that these rollbacks that have happened over the last 14, 15 months are extremely concerning. Yeah, so out of everybody polled, only 14% say this is not a problem. Funding cuts to serious land also deemed a serious problem by 3 out of 4 in every state. Colorado stands out as being even higher in Colorado, not surprisingly. Even the MAGA. 3/4 of MAGA supporters say funding cuts are a problem, although with less intensity than the rest of the electorate. I guess because they're willing to give this administration the benefit of the doubt, but not the rest of us, man. No way. But even 3/4 of them, like there is some common ground there. More than 4 in 5 Western voters are concerned about having fewer firefighters, park rangers, and biologists working in government agencies. Yeah, 91 of those concerned about firefighters. And then the rest of it, scientists and park rangers, that's all in the 80s. Again, 80 and 90% of us are concerned that we have way fewer professionals working in the system. Transitioning from coffee to beer. More than 2/3 of voters believe these changes in laws and rules affecting natural areas will have a negative impact on the West. Removing the Clean Water Act protections from smaller streams and seasonal wetlands, 77% think there's a total negative impact going to come from that. Removing the requirements that oil and gas companies use updated equipment and technology to prevent leaks, methane gas, and other pollutants into the air. 70% think that's a problem. rolling back protections for some plants and wildlife at danger of becoming extinct that are currently protected under the Endangered Species Act. 70% think that's a problem. So these are all things that have already been done by the administration. That's not to say that we couldn't undo them per se if somebody else got elected, or if we have maybe a whole revamp of our government structure. But yeah, there's one area that we all agree on. Westerners across all 8 states are opposed to selling national public lands for oil and gas development. Period. Hard stop. That's in the 80s, the 70s and 80s. Colorado 83, Montana 83, Wyoming 78%. It's a high percentage for a pretty red state there that is against this. Everything else is in the 70s. Voters across the West are also opposed to selling national public lands for housing, with a strong opposition in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Yeah, because selling public land for housing is ridiculous. Most of it exists where people are away from the jobs, away from any infrastructure. That's just a ruse. I mean, that's just a land giveaway. They've tried doing this. I'm glad we stopped it, but everybody out west is opposed to this. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm coming across as like, having a bias for this subject, but I am, I mean, I'm going to read you some open-ended question responses from the voters. So these are just questions that the poll taker, the study maker, let people just sort of riff on their own. Once they are gone for good. We need to preserve them for future generations to enjoy, just as our ancestors did for us. Male, age 65, Montana. Public lands need to remain in public hands. They belong to we the people and should not be sold to private interests. Female, age 35, GOP, Republican, Wyoming. What is done to public lands should be up to the people. Male, 45, Democrat, New Mexico. Conservation of land and protection of the environment are the most important. Male, 35, GOP, Idaho. Keep the funding in place to keep them safe. Do not ever allow their sale. If Mike Lee ever tries to do it again, rebuke him. We only borrow from our children. Let's make sure they have a beautiful future. That's a good one, I would tell them to take climate change seriously. They may not be alive to see the effect, but our future will. It's important to balance protecting natural places and lands and animals as we need to sustain human life. I live in Idaho because of the vast amount of nature. It's beautiful here, and I would hate to see it disappear. Hunting is a way of life for my family. We need our public lands to preserve our heritage and have a safe place for recreation. We need to keep the beauty of New Mexico lands. The native lands are key to our history. These tribes deserve water and property to grow and keep the younger natives in their lands to carry on traditions. The share of voters saying that this has become more increasingly bipartisan has increased in the last 10 years. Support for keeping national monument designations is up across party lines. 87% of Republicans, 92% of independents, and 96% of Democrats. Support for keeping existing national monument designation is strong among the MAGA and the non-MAGA. The MAGA. In total, 91% of people believe that keeping national monument designations in place is strong. Of MAGA supporters, 87% of them want to keep them in place. 50% think definitely it's a strong issue. Of non-MAGA supporters, 94% want to keep existing national monument designations in place. This is why I don't think that there is nearly as much support for this administration as the media would have us believe. I mean, there's 78 pages of this. Even for dark sky stuff, 9 in 10 voters in Arizona, Colorado, and Utah support dark sky management of public lands. That means keeping out light pollution. And it's high across the board, but it's over 90 in those states. Energy and public lands. More Western voters than ever before say they would prefer members of Congress place more emphasis on protecting resources on national public lands over maximizing energy production. That is up to 76% of the population wants legislators to protect natural resources for recreation versus energy production. So there is this doctrine in the public lands management and national forests and stuff. They're supposed to manage the lands for equal use, essentially giving everybody equal footing. But the majority of people would prefer to manage those lands for recreation and not mineral, oil, and gas extraction, timber. I think that's significant. That's saying that we are giving oil and gas companies an equal say in how we manage our public lands. But they're a corporation. Their only obligation is to their shareholders. Our obligation is to our future. I'm sorry, but I don't think this warrants an equal footing. I don't think that managing our public lands warrants putting oil and gas on equal footing with the public's interest. The public's interest should take precedent hands down every time. Should they allow oil and gas access to lands even if locals oppose it? 65% in Wyoming said no. So that's saying, like, even if Carbon County wants to open it up for oil and gas extraction, which they already have, but the other counties say they shouldn't be allowed to just do that unilaterally. Industrial roads and public lands for oil and gas mining. Now, Wyoming feel a little bit differently about that. Half of them are opposed to this, but 64% in Utah are against it. And in Wyoming, it was more than half are against it. It's 54%, so it's not exactly even, but Idaho 68%. So yeah, I mean, people don't want more roads in our tracks, our big parcels of public land. The roadless rule is there for good reason, because the people don't want it, and the scientists don't think that it's a good idea either. I mean, all the scientific research that goes into this stuff, and for this administration to just rip it out without a care. This is a huge one. The percentage of people who would like that an agreement would see it favorable if an agreement would require all states in the region to reduce their water usage to preserve the health of the Colorado River. Across the board, everybody is in favor of that. Everybody is in favor of mandating water usage to maintain the health of the Colorado River. Wyoming being the lowest, of course, because they don't give a fuck. Just a bunch of greenies that use the Colorado River, right? But even 62% of them, I mean, they have rivers that flow into the Colorado River basin. So inadequate water supply. Concerns about inadequate water supply remain high across the entire West. More than 4 in 5 Westerners say inadequate water supply is a serious problem in their state. 2/3 of those describe it as extremely or very serious problem. 87% across these states agree that water usage is a serious problem. PFAS, the forever chemicals, 87% say this is a serious problem. 60% think it's an extreme problem, including almost half of the people in Wyoming. 70% of them think that it's a problem. So that's enough about this study. What can we glean from this brief peruse of the study, which I'll link to below and on the YouTube channel, and you can read it yourself. It's a huge priority for us. We don't want them degraded. We don't want them terrorized, raped, sold, profiteered on. They're our lands. And I think people are starting to take ownership of them and understand that they have a part in keeping them in our hands and keeping them viable, clean, healthy. Keep calling your representatives and your senators on this. The fight continues. I mean, they still want to put in a border wall in Big Bend, and they want to put a mine outside of at the edge of Lake Superior, and one outside of the boundary waters. Not to mention ones in Alaska they're fast tracking the Ambler Road. Oh God. I mean, it's just on all fronts all the time. Stand up and do something about it.